Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I'm your guide, Derek Hayes. Howdy. It's a pleasure to have you with us here tonight. And boy, do I have a barn burner for you this evening. Yet another themed episode. Now this time of year gets me to thinking about growing up. And back then, August meant hard work. Farm work, specifically. I grew up helping family and friends on their farms. We raised animals on our small lot, and I worked at a longhorn cattle ranch for a good 4 years during high school. And like I said, this time of year was one of our busiest. So with the stench of hard work in the air, I introduced tonight's theme: paranormal encounters on the farm. Each and every one of tonight's entries somehow correlates with ranching, farming, raising animals, growing crops, or some combination of all of that. Now, as you're about to learn, some crazy stuff goes down on the farm. And to kick us off and to help sell my point, please welcome Brock from the state of Utah.
Hello, my name is Brock. I'm from Utah. I was driving up around, it had to be in Idaho or Juniper. I mean, it was midday, no clouds in the sky. I had a passenger with me. We're just heading down the road. I mean, I hadn't been driving for too long. Got my license a little late, but anyway, so I was going nice and slow, heading down the road, and I swore I seen this airplane. It had to be about 3/4 the size of just a regular passenger airplane. But it was just hovering above the ground. Had to have been about 100, 200 feet above the ground. Thing wasn't moving forward or backwards. And I mean, I was looking at it and looked at my passenger and my little brother and said, "Hey, what is that? Like, is that thing moving?" As I'm trying to pay attention to the road, and he looked over and I mean, he didn't say nothing for about 30 seconds, just glancing at it. I got a couple more looks at it, and it was just a plane floating in the sky behind this barn. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. I heard something referenced on this other show, Astonishing Legends. Someone seen something, I guess, the same up in Washington or something, but I mean, I know I wasn't crazy, but just nothing made sense. Anyways, keep it up, and yeah, let's keep it spooky.
A shout out to our friends over at Astonishing Legends. And thank you, Brock, for calling in. An airplane hovering over a barn. Well, believe it or not, this one has been reported before. And believe it or not, this one is also 100% explainable. Now, like I said, I've had dozens of reports just like this one. And I was actually lucky enough to experience the phenomenon myself once while driving along the 10 freeway in Ontario, California. Right there, along the airport. You see, this is an optical illusion called the parallax effect, and it all has to do with your perspective and the movement of both you, the witness, and the plane itself. Now, if you really want to understand the concept, check out tonight's show notes, because I've included additional information there. But sadly, Brock, this one is explainable, but I can't say the same for the remainder of tonight's tales. Take this next one for example, a wild one from a familiar voice. Please welcome Cindy from Indiana. Back to the program.
Hi, this is Cynthia Ketchern calling from Avon, Indiana. Back in the 1980s, when I was a young kid, my grandparents had a farm in Randolph County, Winchester, Indiana. And that weekend was near fall. And we didn't allow hunting on the farm, but evidently poachers were there, hunting bear and deer and stuff, and my dad didn't allow hunting on his farm. And anyway, guess what we found in the shed? A mother Bigfoot was hiding with her baby, and they were terrified. The mother's leg was trapped in the bear trap, and Dad helped free him. But what was so unusual about this, guys, is she was an albino Bigfoot. That means she was all white with pink eyes, and so was the baby. The baby was about a couple months old. You know, my dad had a dog with us. It was a dachshund, and her name was Sandy. And anyway, I adopted a Bigfoot family for the weekend. We went back to the hotel in Winchester and got it some more food. And guess what else there was in the vicinity? UFOs can sometimes be detected or not detected. There was a real UFO, but it was undetected at the time because it was transparent. Nobody can see it. So we were wondering, do Bigfoot come from this region or are they from the outer region? You be the judge. Where did these two creatures come from? Were they really Bigfoot? You decide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cindy. You heard the lady, folks. You can decide where these entities came from. But before you go writing anything off, I will remind you that there are many researchers and quote-unquote experts out there that will tell you the very same thing that Cindy just did, that the creature that we know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch is in fact some sort of alien being, transported by the very same UFOs that have been reported for going on 80 years now. Now, how these creatures are smart enough to travel all this way, but not get themselves out of a bear trap, well, that is beyond me. But either way, we enjoyed the story, Cindy, and we hope you're doing well up there. And thank you again for sharing the call. And folks, I have a lot more to offer coming up. But first, a quick message from tonight's sponsor.
Down, unless you want to be. Your first love story is free when you sign up.
Now, as I get older, I keep thinking I really should go to the doctor more. You know, to deal with things like lower back pain, sleep trouble, and to keep up with my general wellness. But it can be tough to get a doctor these days. The system makes it feel impossible to find the right doctor for my needs. Well, that was until I found ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance or located nearby or are a good fit with your medical needs and are highly rated by verified patients. There are over 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, primary care, urgent care, and more. And most importantly, appointments made through ZocDoc happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even get same-day appointments. Before using ZocDoc, I had to wait over 4 weeks for an appointment, which would often stop me from even bothering to get the care that I needed. But with ZocDoc, there are no long waits on hold because everything is done online. Plus, it's completely free to use. It's just so easy. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/MAU and find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/MAU. ZocDoc.com/MAU. There is also a link in the show notes.
Stories of him doing this.
And will consistently deliver better than restaurant.
Now, let's take things up a notch, shall we? From wild, wonderful West Virginia, please welcome Jake to the program.
Hey Derek, my name's Jake, giving you a call from the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. My story takes place probably 20 years ago. Where my mom lives is in a very history-rich area of the state. There's a couple pretty well-known towns nearby. If you're a history buff, we have Shepherdstown, Harpers Ferry, Sharpsburg, Maryland, different areas that were very big in the Civil War. So there's always rumors and, people see this and that around the area. And growing up, I never really believed in any of that stuff. So taking it back, when we were kids, we used to get with the neighbors on their farm and play hide and seek tag. And we'd wait until it got dark. That way, it makes it harder for everybody. Makes it a little bit more fun. And, we're kids. We like to play outside after dark. That's what we did back in the 90s and early 2000s before technology took over. Anyhow, we would get together and go down near their barn. One person would face towards the house. Everyone else would hide in the field back behind them, near the farming equipment, behind the little sheds, things like that. So one night it's my turn to count. And I was sitting on the box they had built near the ring for the horses to run around in. And I'm sitting here, doing my thing, counting, facing towards the house. And off to the left, about 100 yards from me, is their barn. Where it would sit pretty even with the front of the barn. And the barn had a really bright, and I mean bright, motion light on the front of it. So if you were the one that was hiding, you wouldn't want to get near that light, because it's going to be a dead giveaway as to where you are. So I'm sitting here one night, super quiet outside. All you hear is crickets and the frogs. And I'm counting. And off to my left, I can kind of see something. And I hear audible running. And it looks like a small child, maybe 10, 11 years old, in period clothing, just running full speed towards the barn. And I sit here and I watch, and then the motion light never goes off, and this child runs right through the front of the barn. It was audible. I saw it with my own eyes, and it never turned this light on at all. I mean, this door was closed, and it was a heavy door. You would have heard it if it opened. From then on, I believed in ghosts. I never did before. It was always a story. Even tried to tell this story to the people that I was with. Hey, did you hear that? Did you see anything? Nobody ever saw what I saw. From that point forward, I loved anything paranormal. I always thought that if I saw a ghost, it was going to be something scary. It wasn't scary at all. I thought it was just so cool. And I've done, so much research. I've watched all the shows, the podcasts. It's just something that has interested me my entire life leading up to this point. We all have that one experience that changes our minds and makes us realize, there's other things out there besides just us. Anyhow, thank you, Derek. I appreciate it.
Well, it sounds like that was an amazing experience. So thank you for sharing it with us, Jake. And I really appreciate that you didn't find the experience all that scary. I imagine that lets you better accept what you saw. It's gotta help when you take the panic element out of the equation. Now, there are a dozen different questions to be asked about this call, but there's only one that I can't help but wonder. Just who was this child ghost? Now, I've seen enough movies to know that if he ran through a barn wall, that would suggest that whoever he was, he occupied the space before the barn ever existed. So if you can date the barn, Jake, it might just give you some clues as to when this former human roamed the earth. Now, regardless of all that, it was a great story. And we thank you again, Jake, for taking the time to share it. And folks, if you have a story you would like to share here on the program, give my hotline a call at 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or record your story on the voice memo app on your phone. I believe every phone automatically has an app like this, by the way. At the very least, the iPhones do. Anyway, record your story on that app and just email it to me at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to have your youngsters share their stories. Monsters Among Us Jr. begins in just a few short weeks. And I'll be making an announcement on that coming up on Thursday. So get those calls in as well. 833-MAU-KIDS. And the email is monstersamongusjr@gmail.com. We're really looking forward to hearing from all of you. Now, if you do call in, you just might end up on the air, just like our next caller, Sarah, all the way from Florida.
Hi, Derek. This is Sarah from Florida. I live out in Central Florida in what used to be agriculture land, and before that it belonged to Native Americans. So it was ranch land, and then it got divided up into large lots. So that's who I'm thinking is haunting the area I'm in, is a former rancher. And my former neighbors, one of them was going through some real hard times, and she said she was sitting on her couch crying and just having a hard time. And someone sat down next to her, nobody there, and put their hand on her shoulder. It was real comforting for her. Then they lost their home and moved, and a new neighbor moved in. And before you know it, he was going through some hard times too. His wife left him. And he came over and asked me if I had ever heard of anything weird happening over there. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? And he said that he was sitting on the couch, really depressed, and somebody sat down next to him and put their hand on their shoulder in a comforting way. So I told him that I think it's a rancher that lived in the area. Once I was asleep, and something woke me up, and it was this old man that was leaning over looking at me. All I saw was the top half of him, his pajama tops. This old balding man kind of staring down at me. And I just thought, I'm not seeing this, and I just pulled blankets over my head, but I knew I'd seen it. And another time, my husband was going to be burning some things, brush and so on, and I told him, stay out there and watch the fire, because it makes me really nervous. So I was out doing something, and I came walking back, and there he was, standing there, watching the fire. His back was to me. He had on his flannel shirt that he always liked to wear. So then I went into the house, and he was in the kitchen. I'm like, who was that out there? Did you just come in? He goes, no, I've been in here all this time. So I looked out, and there was nobody there. So I think there was that rancher again, just kind of making sure everything was safe. And I've never heard anything, really bad as far as anything he's done. But I have heard from other people, just seeing this old man around. But I was listening about the flannel man, and I think that the flannel man really is about dating a ghost, because those flannel shirts were really popular back in the 70s. Everyone wore them, especially people up in the northern states. So that may be, just a way of dating your ghost. So anyway, that's my story. You have a great night, and I'm enjoying your podcast. It's keeping me company when I work late. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a fun notion to think that the old rancher is still looking over the farm. And that's an interesting position on the Flannel Man legends. A link to the show notes if you don't know what that is. And Sarah is right. That buffalo check pattern was quite popular in the 1970s and even into the late 1980s. So perhaps she's onto something here. Maybe what we've perceived as a quote-unquote flannel man was in fact simply a ghost wearing garments of his time. Regardless, it's a fun little dive into paranormal farm life. And Sarah, we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Built to laugh. Says out loud he's not honoring the trade request.
Unless...
Summer is here and we're all chasing something, whether it's Bigfoot in your nearest state park or your kids during a backyard game of tag. Don't let bad socks and blisters ruin the fun. Bombas make socks that'll keep you comfortable no matter what this summer brings. Bombas moisture-wicking hiking socks keep me cool and blister-free during my daily morning walks. They make specialized pairs for everything: running, tennis, golf, you name it. And they don't stop at just socks. They have fresh white tees, soft, sweat-wicking underwear, and waterproof slides that are perfect for the beach, backyard, and everywhere in between. And if you're traveling this summer, check out their compression socks to help curb aches and make long flights more comfortable. Best of all, they don't just feel good, they do good as well. For every pair that you purchase, Bombas donates another pair to someone in need, which makes me feel great about my choice to shop at Bombas. For me, the quality of Bombas really stands out from the rest. You won't be wearing holes in your Bombas anytime soon. Trust me. Head over to bombas.com/MAU and use code MAU for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/MAU and use code MAU at checkout. bombas.com/MAU and use code MAU.
250 today, who's down there,
Now, Sarah's story wasn't the only run-in with a prior custodian of a farm. Lumen from Oregon found themselves in a similar situation. Here's that account.
Hi, Derek. My name is Lumen. I am from the state of Oregon, and it's lumen like the measurement of light, so like lumens. My story takes place in my hometown, on my home farm. I'm fifth-gen farmer. Lots of history, lots of haunting. So the house that I grew up in is been rebuilt on the same foundation almost every few years, just to, keep it up to maintenance. And there was the original farm manager that I was told existed by my grandmother and grandfather, but my mother doesn't believe them. His name was Thomas Knight. He had unfortunately passed away on the property in the house that I grew up in. Who knows how long ago. He had fallen asleep in the room below where my bedroom was, and he fell asleep smoking a cigar, and he caught on fire and burnt to death. So the story is about what I believe is his spirit. I've had too many encounters with it to name. One of my more significant ones was when I was 10. We first moved into the main house after the family got too big, and my mom was the head of the farm now, and I was horrified of my bedroom, terrified. I still am scared to sleep in there to this day, but I have to soon. And the first experience I ever had was my bed was like side by side to the closet. And I remember rolling over in my bed the first few nights of us living there, and there was a shadowy man that had popped out of the side of the closet and was staring at me. It was horrifying. Another time after my bed moved again, it was now angled, directly in front of the closet, so I could roll over and look in. This is before I had a curtain, and I would see something just staring at me from that closet. It was terrible. And there used to be this Ernie doll, like Bert and Ernie. My uncle's name was Ernie, so he had a lot of Bert and Ernie dolls and stuff like that my grandmother got him. And it was an old Ernie doll from like the 90s, and it was still in a box, no batteries. And sometimes it would start going off and singing little songs like the Rubber Ducky song and so forth. And it was terrible. And then eventually after a while I got a curtain, and that activity moved from the closet to he would stand in front of my bed and stare at me at night. I was so used to it at that point that I would just be like, oh, hey, Tom, which I assumed it was Tom. And I would just kind of ignore him throughout my life in that house. I would just be like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? And act like we were buddies. And my cousin told me that she had seen him once. She was running out of my sister's room, who was right adjacent from my room, and my door was cracked open. It was the daytime at this point. And she remembers looking into the door and seeing a man leaning against my bed frame, smoking a cigar. And it was just a shadowy man. You couldn't really see any facial features, but he was smoking something, leaning against my bed frame all casually. And my sisters used to tell me how they hated when I would leave my door open when I was gone, because the shadow man would stare at them from my door frame. And it was just experience after experience in that room my entire life. My uncles had sleep paralysis. My other uncle would have night terrors and other sort of horrible dreams. And I remember when I was moving out, I was like, all right, Tom, I'm leaving. And he was not happy with me that I was leaving. And I remember feeling a sharp pain as I was getting ready to lay down for my last night in that room. And I pulled my covers, and there's just a long, 3-finger scratch mark down my leg. And it was there for days. It hurt. And I was like, okay, if you're so bitter about it, fine. And ever since then, when I moved out, I've had one experience, and it was at my boyfriend's house, and it wasn't Tom, but Tom had been haunting that room for who knows how long. But you could smell cigarette smoke down in the room where he died. But that's my story. Thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to express ourselves, and you have a good one. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Lumen. I know buying old farms and turning them into homesteads or country retreats or what have you is very popular these days. Sarah and I have even toyed with that prospect ourselves. I would absolutely love some acreage and a big old barn in which to build projects. And that concept is very appealing. But spaces like that are few and far between here in SoCal. And though MAU is a relatively large paranormal podcast, it's certainly not large enough for us to afford to do something like that. So that dream will continue to be a dream. But that may be for the best, because as we just learned from Sarah and Lumen, the previous tenants of these spaces have a hard time letting go of the land that they cared for all those years. So sure, you'd be getting a lot of land and a big old farmhouse, but you also might be getting a new, unseen roommate. One that doesn't appreciate you sleeping in. So thank you again, Lumen, for sharing your account. We truly appreciate that you've called in. Now, maybe you're as curious as I am here on the connection between farming and the paranormal. So we did a little bit of research on our end, and we managed to track down a list of the most haunted farms here in America. Now, the following information is courtesy of morningagclips.com, and here are the top 5. Number 5 is the Conjuring House, aka the Old Arnold Estate, which was built as a farmhouse back in 1736. Located in Harrisville, Rhode Island, the Conjuring House is infamous for reports of ghostly apparitions, violent poltergeist activity, and a malevolent spirit believed to be linked to an accused witch named Bathsheba Sherman. Number 4 is country legend Loretta Lynn's plantation home, Hurricane Mills. This Tennessee ranch is said to be haunted by Confederate soldiers, a mourning lady in white named Beulah Anderson, and weird electrical occurrences like a chandelier staying lit during total power loss. Coming in third is the infamous John Bell Farm. The Bell Farm, located in Adams, Tennessee, is the home of the infamous Bell Witch. The Bell family was plagued by poltergeist activity, disembodied voices, physical attacks, and a spirit that claimed responsibility for the death of the farm's namesake. And the second most haunted farm in the U.S., according to morningagclips.com, is the Myrtles Plantation. Built in St. Francisville, Louisiana in 1796, the Myrtles is reportedly haunted by at least a dozen different spirits, including Chloe, a turban-clad former slave accused of poisoning the household, the ghostly steps of William Winter as he died on the 17th stair, phantom children, moving objects, handprints in the mirrors, and a piano that plays all by itself. And finally, the most haunted farm in America is one that I don't think I've even ever heard of. The haunted house near Hinsdale. And here's what I've learned. Back in the 1970s, the Dandy family moved into a quiet farmhouse near Hinsdale, New York, only to be met with shadowy figures lurking in the woods, disembodied chanting, echoing through the hills, and strange forces that left claw marks and bruises on their bodies. Even after a priest attempted an exorcism, something stayed behind. And to this day, investigators say the house breathes with a darkness that watches from the trees. And that's in the western New York area, if you're interested. Now, the full list is, of course, posted in tonight's show notes. Now, folks, it's hard to have a farm without a few animals. And I think Sylvia can help us fill our animal quota for this evening. So please join me in welcoming her to tonight's program.
Hi, Derek. This is Sylvia from North Jersey. I live in a town in North Jersey that's pretty old, 1800s, early 1900s. Most of the houses were built. I live in a ranch that was built in 1985. I live in a beautiful street. There's lots of trees and this old stone fence, so it really has an old world feel to it. And I have a really big backyard. When we moved in about 15 years ago, I'd wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, and I would hear kind of metal banging, like a blacksmith. The bellows and the sound of someone making horseshoes. You know what that sounds like. We've all seen a lot of movies with that. And that would happen off and on for a couple months. After a couple months of living in the house, I redid my bedroom, and I took some before and after pictures. And when I took the pictures, I noticed there was a lot of orbs in the room. And it was very, very strange, but, I just didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it was some water on the lens or something like that. So I have a friend who has actually a mediumship school, and sometimes I go to her events to really support her and all the mediums that study under her, and they do a lot of gatherings where they do readings. And I had gone to several of them over a course of maybe 5 years. And every time I went to these meetings and someone would do kind of a reading, they would say something about a lot of horses, that a lot of horses are around me. And it just didn't happen once. It happened many, many, many times. And so it kind of became a joke between my friend and I. Like, whenever someone mentioned horses, I would kind of raise my hand because it was always, you have several horses near you and what have you. Well, one time a medium had said that there's a bunch of horses around me and they look to me for comfort because there's another entity that was really abusing the horses in life and now in death was keeping them kind of, I guess, from crossing over. I'm not quite sure. But I felt very, very bad about that. So my friend did a kind of a release, some kind of ritual that helped release the horses. And so I felt kind of better after that. But, it was very interesting. Some time after that, I was talking to my neighbor over the fence, and I was telling her this interesting story of everything that had happened, And my neighbor had said, well, that's really odd. She said, because when we moved in, and her house is, I think, from the early 1900s, she said, we found all of these horseshoes when we were digging up the property to plant flowers and what have you. She says, I have a couple. Do you want one? So I took one, and I still have it to this day. So I thought that was pretty odd, too. And she added that, she said, across the street, that was the big house. There was a very large house across the street from me up on a hill. And she said, well, that's where the big family of this town lived. And next door was the carriage house, which is now a residence. She said, so maybe this was the area that they kept the horses in. I mean, it only made sense. So I just thought all of that kind of lined up, and it was so interesting. After my friend did the rescue kind of for these horses, and she said that she got rid of this man, I didn't have any more sounds in my house, or I didn't have any more orbs showing up. And so hopefully they're at peace. Thank you, and I really love the podcast, and thanks for giving everybody a platform. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sylvia. Absolutely incredible. I particularly enjoy how it all sort of weaves together, because it sounds like all the homes in that little area were once part of this larger estate, in one form or another. So it makes sense that this activity would pop up from time to time. And like I said, what you've just reported is incredible stuff, Sylvia. And of course, we appreciate you taking the time to share your experience here with us.
Starting at 6 a.m. Docking up the pointless meeting.
Sasquatch.com for details. Hear the radio ads about the IRS.
Now, it's not all ghosts and ghouls that are infesting these farms. Sometimes a beast or two slips within the fences. Take Dom's experience, for example. He's calling in all the way from New Zealand.
Hey there, Derek. This is Dom here from the UK originally, now living in New Zealand, but I'm listening to Season 9, Episode 11, which you featured quite a lot of black cat sightings. Thought I'd ring in with my own, that me and my dad witnessed probably when I was about 14. So we were out one night stalking fox, just keeping the fox population down around our pheasant pens, which is kind of like for the driven shoots. But yeah, the foxes have been rampant that year, so we'd been out most nights just, flashlighting foxes and knocking them over with a 223 or 556 as you guys call them. Thought we'd seen a fox. It wasn't a fox. What did come out from the back of the bush line was a 3 feet tall big black cat, probably 5 to 6 feet long, with a tail as thick as like a 2-litre Coke bottle. So a real big brushy tail. And it was stood against a dry stone wall. Typically those are about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. This thing was a foot below the wall. We both looked at each other, obviously looking for a fox, and then this thing came walking out. It walked for, I want to say, probably 60 meters. We flashed it up with the rifle and the big candle power sort of flashlight that we were running at the time. I think it was 1 million candle power. So yeah, we had a clear sight of it in the darkness. Watched it for a good 20 seconds, walking along the bottom of this field, about 120 metres, 150 maybe, to the bottom of the field. And this is in West Yorkshire, a little place just outside a village called Clayton West. And yeah, we were not expecting to see a big black cat, knowing that, I think in the 70s, that licenses for all sort of wild animals got kind of banned, and most people that did keep them kind of just opened their pen and gave them a shoe. Watch this thing, like I say, walk for probably 50, 60 metres along the bottom of this field. We'd had a round chambered thinking that there was a fox coming through, because we'd been squeaking foxes for the last hour in that field. And yeah, this thing came walking out. And just as we were about to kind of re-flash the light, we'd been watching it. You typically turn the light off, chamber you round, turn the light on, take the shot. We'd done the first half, came to put the light back on it, and just as we'd put the light on for about a second, watched it bounce straight over this 4.5 feet dry stone wall. One jump, never saw it again. We did see signs of, predation of not typical sort of what we'd find from a fox, i.e. claw marks, probably 7 feet up a big old spruce tree, and then on a bit of fallen timber, like an old bough going over a river system. End of that, there was a big old hare. So that's kind of like what I guess you'd call a jackrabbit in the US. Pretty big old hare, just stashed at the end of a log, like something had been up there just eating it. And at the base of that, another tree in the spruce, like I say, just the big old pole rake marks, where I was like, okay, we've got something else in this wood that's not generally seen or sighted. So yeah, cheers for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. The amount of evidence supporting the claim that there are big cats in parts of the UK is downright overwhelming. I'd say even more so than here in the States. And I believe there's even been big cat DNA collected there in the UK somewhere. though officials there still maintain that there is no breeding population of these animals. Though for the life of me, I cannot understand why. I don't see any issues assuming they can find one another. So while your experience is very much impressive, Dom, it is not at all that surprising. But we thank you for sharing the story with us nonetheless. And the fact that it could be explainable doesn't diminish the fact that the encounter was downright eerie. Thank you again for calling in. Now, folks, before we continue here, I wanted to announce that our shop has officially reopened. Not only that, but we've also debuted our brand new Halloween design for 2025. An amazing piece of work by an artist that I've admired for a long time now, Mr. Sam Heimer. Now, the artwork, of course, printed on our high-quality blanks, features Mothman and Sasquatch lighting a classic jack-o'-lantern. It's perfect for the spooky season, which coincidentally is right around the corner. So go to monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the shop tab to get full access to this design. And when you're done shopping around our page, be sure to check out Sam Heimer's art. It truly is some of my favorite stuff on the internet. You can find a link to his work in tonight's show notes. So a huge thanks to Sam for putting magic to paper for us. And a huge thanks to you for supporting our show. Now again, to get that t-shirt or any other number of MAU-themed items, just visit our shop at monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the shop tab. And while I'm at it, a big welcome to my mom, Holly, back in Ohio. She's officially taken over all shipping duties. So, best of luck to you, Mom. Now, back to the action. And this next entry takes us back to the barn. Please welcome Ty, out of that state up north.
Hey, Derek, this is Ty. I reside in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and where the story takes place when I was in high school, probably back around 2015, 2016, I worked on this small dairy farm, small operation, maybe 100 cows milking. It was a morning milking shift. The shift started at like 4 o'clock. And I get up, go to the farm, get ready. And they're probably around 3:50 towards the winter, so it's like still pretty dark out during this time. I get there. The first thing you do in the morning is you clean the pens, scrape them down. This is an old-style stanchion barn. So if anyone who knows that, it's like very open concept. You can see a lot. On the back side of the barn, there's a sliding barn door where all their other groups of cows were. And beneath that barn door, there's like a foot of space where you can see into the holding pens. As I was going, I was scraping the cows down, and something caught the corner of my eye. I noticed underneath the barn door there was a pair of boots walking. And I thought at first it was my boss. Maybe he's there early. So I yelled my boss's name, trying to get his attention, and didn't hear anything. And then I was like, okay, got suspicious. So I peeked my head in there, and nothing. But I know what I saw. It was like a pair of boots walking across behind the door. It creeped me out because I don't know, just something I didn't expect to see. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little creeped out, so I went in our warm room for the calves and waited for my coworker to get there. And I tried telling him the story, and he didn't believe me, of course. But this isn't the only occurrence that happened while I was working there. After this took place, I found out that my boss's dad actually passed away on the property while he was working because he used to own the farm. He had a heart attack out back. And then this next part of the story took place probably about maybe 6 months later, and I actually had people with me to witness this. We're sitting there, it was me, my one coworker, and we were training a new guy. We're just getting started, probably around 4:30 in the morning, still dark out, and we're getting going milking. And, you know, me and my other coworker were talking to the new guy, just, you know, trying to learn thing about him, you know, make a good coworker. All of a sudden, we're all sitting there, and we hear someone just yell. It was a very human kind of older person voice yell, "Get back to work." And our boss wasn't there yet. There's a lot of windows in the barn, so you can see if like someone pulls up. And all of our faces went white, and we instantly went back to work. And we didn't really talk about it. It scared us. It really did. It was as loud as like if I was sitting next to someone yelling, and we had no rhyme or reason for it. We know what we heard, and it was just really spooky to us. And then I was telling that story to one of my other coworkers, and he told me that he also had some weird experiences on the farm. You would hear like whistling, footsteps, and all that. Yeah, so it's like been a lot that's happened there. But then after that incident, there wasn't any much, and then I don't work at the farm anymore. But hope you can use this in one of your podcasts. Keep it spooky. Thanks.
Thank you, Ty. Now, anytime I hear about a haunted barn, I can't help but think of an infamous murder and a tragic discovery made in an incredible manner. The story of the murder in the Red Barn. In 1827, single mother Mariah Martin was murdered by her then lover and known fraudster, William Corder, at a local landmark known as the Red Barn. Now, Corder claimed that she and Martin had eloped and regularly sent letters back to her family saying she was doing well, but that the couple couldn't return to town due to Corder's dodgy history with local law enforcement. A year later, in 1828, Mariah Martin's stepmother had a premonition that revealed where her daughter's body was buried. The visions came to her in dream form and seemed to convey that Mariah was not only dead, but hidden somewhere in the now infamous Red Barn. Mariah's stepmother finally convinced her husband to check the grain silos at the barn, where they discovered Martin's body, stuffed in a feed sack. Now, longtime listeners of this program know I'm a pretty big Tom Waits fan. Don't worry, your grandparents know who he is. Anyway, one of my favorite tunes of his is inspired by this tragic, albeit incredible legend. And I've linked to that song in tonight's show notes. But a fair warning to everyone, because it's not something that you hear every day. Unless you're me. But I've linked to it in tonight's show notes. Well, thank you again, Ty, for sharing your story and reminding me of one of my favorite murder ballads. Now, I think we can sneak in one more story before we have to take tonight's final ad break. So let's field a cowboy call from Mike over in Oklahoma.
Hello, this is Mike from Tulsa, Oklahoma. A couple days ago, me and a group of friends were just talking about our own spooky stories, and I relayed one that I thought I would like to share with you. I grew up in the beautiful state of Oklahoma, and throughout the 80s, I was living in an area called Moore. It's just south of Oklahoma City. Back then, it was a much smaller town than where it is now. In the neighborhood we lived in, it was connected to a large field. This field didn't have any kind of crop in it, but it definitely could have. Oddly enough, whoever owned that field, it was empty. There was no crops, no animals, anything in that area. But growing up in the 80s, that was an opportunity for myself and my friends to explore, and that we did. We found in the middle of this blank field a group of trees. This group of trees maybe was about the size of a football field. It wasn't that big, but just big enough for us to get in there and to explore. One day we came across this part of a dirt mound that had a resemblance to what we described as a cowboy. It was roughly about, I would say about 5.5 feet long. You can definitely see where the boots would be, and 2 legs, the torso, 2 arms, and what looked like a cowboy hat. So being curious kids as we were, we was like, well, how cool would this be if this was a grave of some sort, unmarked? So we decided to go ahead and see if we can find anything, maybe from the land run days or something of the past. As we dug into this dirt, we didn't find anything. So we just put the dirt back. Of course, it was no longer in the shape of a cowboy, but we had fun for that day, and we really liked this group of trees. We remembered how we got there and the trail we took, came back a couple days, and we were thinking about making a fort in these trees. So we brought a lot of various different equipment with us, and we came across this mound, and the mound was in the shape of the cowboy again. Completely perfect, just the same way that we found it. It even had grass growing on it. There was no indication that we had dug up anything. The only thing that changed from that point on is that we would see a cowboy-type shadow figure, which my friends would call a ghost. We'd see him hang around these little groups of trees. And we did end up making a fort in there, and we made like a tree fort. It went up midway up this tree. I remember we were up there playing solitaire, and we looked down, and we saw this apparition. You know, my friends were just freaking out. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, but I've always had like a weird thing for the paranormal and strange. But I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, so I climbed down. By the time I got down the tree, the figure was gone. But in its place were a pair of boot prints. That was enough to scare my friends away pretty permanently. They didn't want to go back to our fort. I kept visiting the location all the way up until around 88, 89. That's when we ended up moving to Houston, Texas. Now, when I visit the old place and more, it's nothing but houses and developments. I don't know whatever happened to the cowboy-shaped mound. I don't know if that cowboy figure is still floating around. Never brought us any harm, but it was definitely strange. Keep it spooky.
Much obliged, Mike. I love the story. But I wonder if some nature artist might have created the mound. Maybe they snuck back there and built the mound with their foot or some tools or something. Just as a bit of a renegade art project. But of course that doesn't explain the strange, dark apparition that Mike and his friends saw. Unless, of course, the artist was mistaken for that apparition. But I sure hope not, because I love the idea that there is a cowboy ghost out there somewhere, and that he's somehow replicating his image in earthworks. That's not something you hear about all that often. And the last thought that I'm going to leave you with here is this. If what Mike said is true and there is now a house over this very spot, I wonder if the cowboy has taken to haunting the home instead. Could you imagine walking back to your bedroom, only to find that your sheets and comforter have been rearranged in the shape of a cowboy? Now, however you want to slice it, I thoroughly enjoyed this entry, Mike. So thank you again for calling in.
The realtor that sells his listings for about 6.2% more money.
Never coached an NFL game in his life as a head coach.
I don't know where I'm at in this negotiations.
Now the sun is setting. It's cooling off and the dew is thick in the air. It's just about supper time. Time for us to be making our way back to the farmhouse. Hopefully the non-haunted farmhouse. Please welcome Tanya from the farming-rich state of Iowa.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I grew up in rural southeast Iowa on my family's 100-year-old farm. It was a mile down a gravel road and 5 miles to the closest town. All 4 surrounding sides of the property were enveloped in fields, and depending on the year, it was either soybeans or corn. Corn was always a bit creepier, especially the summer after I watched Children of the Corn for the first time. But scary movie influence aside, I have always felt like I was being watched out there. to the point that I didn't realize there was any other way to feel. We lived there from the time I was a few years old until after I graduated high school, and I never could shake the feeling of being watched. Have you ever felt like there was somebody in your back seat when you're sitting in your car? Because that is exactly what it felt like. Actually, I made it a point to check my back seat repetitively when I was old enough to drive myself. So this property, it was poorly lit. It had a large barn lot that had absolutely no lighting. So one evening, my dad asked my younger brother to go out to the barn lot and turn on a pump for the well water for our livestock. And my brother was completely terrified to do it alone. Being siblings, instead of helping him, we picked on him for being scared. He ended up going out and doing it himself. He came back in shortly after, crying and screaming, saying that there was something out there. And honestly, at the time, I didn't think much of it, and we chalked it up to him being dramatic and trying to get out of doing chores. So fast forward, and the night of September 9th of 1999, that date will always be ingrained in my memory. My sister and I sat in our bedroom. We had our bunk beds pushed up against the window, and from both beds, we were able to see out of the window. On a clear night, you could see the soft glow of the two nearest towns to our north, the first being 7 miles away, and the second was 20 miles away. We were looking out the window because we heard a loud bang, and while that wasn't totally out of the norm because we had large fuel tanks in the barn lot that would sometimes expand and let out a metallic boom, it still got our attention. So as we looked out the window, we saw a light in the sky. We watched as it flew east, and then it stopped. It stopped flying and just hung there. We knew a plane wasn't going to be able to do that. And then it moved and it headed north, and then it stopped again. And then we noticed that there were other lights in the sky, and they were also stopping and zigzagging. More and more lights were popping into the sky until we counted about 30 of them. I can't tell you how long we sat there and we watched them, but eventually they started disappearing. And when they were all gone, the sky was dark again. We saw one last thing that absolutely blew our minds. A giant one, bigger than all of the other ones. It flew over us, and then it disappeared. I don't remember going to sleep that night, or if I slept at all. And honestly, my sister and I never really talked about it. After that, I think we knew that nobody was going to believe us. And it wasn't until we both became adults, actually just a couple of years ago, I went and asked her, "Hey, do you remember that night when we were looking out the window?" And she finished my sentence and said, "When we saw those lights, yes, I think about it all the time." Since moving out of that house and gaining perspective that not only is it not normal to feel like you're constantly being watched, I've been building my knowledge around this area of the country. And actually, to my surprise, I found an article that claims that there are a large number of ley lines that intersect right on that property, which would explain a lot of things. With that information, I actually grabbed a friend of mine who happens to be a Reiki master and equipped to clear energies of areas and spirits, and we went out to the family farm. Our family farm is actually now abandoned. None of my family currently lives there, but we still own the property. And when we pulled up, she immediately had me stop and told me that there's a large dark mass hanging over our home. And out in front of the house is an Indian warrior spirit. This Indian is the protector of the land, and she was able to get him to help her from the spirit side as she cleared this large dark mass that hung over the old farmhouse. So while this property is currently sitting empty, and someday, even with the experiences I have had, I hope to be able to live there again, with the Indian spirit's blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for the entry. Now, the farm is an active place. Paranormally active, as Tanya can attest. And strange sensations, loud, disembodied sounds, strange lights in the sky. It's all creepy, but not nearly as creepy as a field full of corn this time of year. I dare anyone to walk through or even past a cornfield at night, and hear the blades rustling and see the wind move the rows and not get spooked out. And if this movie was on your rotation as a child, best of luck to you.
Every child is afraid of the dark, the unknown, the nightmare. In Gatlin, Nebraska, that nightmare is in the corn. Stephen King's Children of the Corn.
Now it sounds like a fun place to grow up, Tanya. Ghosts, UFOs, and everything. So thank you again for calling in and sharing your experiences. And just like that, folks, our workday is over. So now it's time to get some shut-eye so that we can do this all again tomorrow. But before we go, how about one more story? Please welcome Paul to tonight's program.
Hello, Derek. My name is Paul. This story takes place on October 7th, 1984, and there's a very specific reason I remember that date clearly, which I'll get to in a minute. I had grown up on a farm in remote northern Minnesota, and in fact, we were actually very close to Canada. And because we were so close to Canada, my parents used to go shopping up there quite a bit. It was a good spot to buy boots, of all things. And that particular day, my parents had gone up there to go shopping, and it was just me and my two other brothers left at home on our farm. And my parents were gone most of the day. After a while, the phone rang, and it was them. They had called us to come and meet them for supper at a local restaurant, which was local. I mean, it was about 12 miles away, but it was local for us. So we all hopped in the car. I was the youngest of the three brothers, and I was about 14 at the time, and we were all 5 years apart. So my oldest brother, he'd have been 24, so he was doing the driving. You know, being up north, we didn't have much to do for entertainment. However, one thing we could do is on the drive over to the restaurant, we had the option of, going the main road, or we could go a back road, which would take us by, pretty close to a landfill, where the county would collect and bury their garbage. And the road which led down to this landfill, you could look down it and see black bears. We had seen them quite often there, and it was always a thrill to see them just kind of lumbering down the road headed towards the landfill. And anyway, we drove a mile north. We took a right, so now we're facing east, and we drove about 3 miles east. This road was, nothing particular about it. I know there was an old pioneer cemetery along the way, which was rather unique. I mean, it was so old they had even buried people under piles of stone, which was pretty unique. We'd always just take a glance out there. And then the road would open up to a field on your left, which would be north again. But it was a rather large field. Anyway, when we got to the field, this farmer had been working on this field for several years. He had been clearing it and had piles of logs and brush and stuff, which he would pile up and then burn. And, when we got to this field, he was out there burning this large pile. We kind of commented among ourselves, it was nice to see him, finally finishing up this field and burning off the last pile of logs he had, because we had been watching him do this, like I said, for many years. So we drove by the fire, and we were getting excited because we just knew we were going to see some black bears on this road coming up. And the intersection, which intersected on the corner of the field, it was about another 300 yards to the corner of this field, where the intersection was. You would look down to the right or south, that's where you'd see the black bears walking down the road. So we get up to this intersection, and we look down this road, and there was nothing there. So we're like, oh, well, one of those things. And so we turned left. We headed north, which would have been the corner of the field. And our attention went back out to the big fire that was going out in the field. So we looked back out in the field, and there was nothing there. There was no fire, no farmer, nothing. Just an empty field. this kind of took us back. All three of us had witnessed this huge fire going out there, and we even stopped the car. You have to remember, this is well before the days of any ghost hunting shows or anything like that, or before the word debunked was even uttered. We stopped the car, and, being three farm boys, we got out and we had to, figure this out. We even walked out in that field, and it was nothing but bone-dry grass out there. And if you had even dropped a match, the whole place would have gone up. And we looked around. We tried to come up with a solution to this. I had turned around and looked in the woods around the edge of the field, thinking there may have been someone else with a fire around there. There was nothing, absolutely nothing there. And I can still see that farmer throwing stuff onto this fire. Now, to give you a size comparison of this fire, just imagine about like two full-size pickup trucks stacked on top of each other on fire. That's just for size comparison. And the farmer, he was wearing overalls. And when I saw him, he was throwing this, big log up into the top of the fire. When I think back and recall this, even though we were in a car, when you drive by a large fire like that, you can still feel the heat through the windshield and, through the windows. And we never did feel anything like that, which, we didn't think of it at the time. Recently, I had talked to my brothers about this. They both clearly remember it. And one thing our older brother never told us at the time was, he goes, when we drove by that fire, he says, that farmer turned and looked at me, and he was wearing a straw hat, and his eyes were black. And my brother said he got the impression that the farmer kind of told him without words, basically said, I got this, just keep going. And like I said, our older brother never told us this until recently. Now, the significance of the date, which was October 7th, came into play when I was handed a book written by a friend of ours. This was about a week after the incident that my brothers and I witnessed together. We were handed this book about the fire of 1910. There was a huge forest fire that went through that area in 1910, and I know for sure it killed 27 people. And they say it killed as many as 48, but they did recover 27. And the date was October 7th, which was the exact day that my brothers and I witnessed that large fire. I don't know if that's coincidence or what, but I thought that always had something to do with it as well. So that's what my brothers and I saw. We can't explain it. So thank you, Derek, for doing this podcast. I know it's a lot of work. It's a terrific podcast.
Thank you, Paul. Well, what do you think here, folks? A possessed farmer, a glitch in the Matrix, a wrinkle in time, a ghost, or a simple trick of the eye? And speaking of the eyes, why and how was the farmer's eyes all black? Now, I enjoy a good mystery, and this certainly is one of those. So thank you again, Paul, for calling in and closing us out here this evening. Because that's going to do it for tonight. A big old thanks to everyone for swinging by. The Monsters Among Us podcast is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Red Crow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes, Delaney Bowers, and Connor Ryan. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Now give us a like and follow on our social media accounts. Give us a like and follow on YouTube as well. Leave us a rate and review wherever that sort of thing is possible. And of course, don't forget to join our Discord server to get up-to-date conversations about the show. Now don't forget to watch our film. Go to BorregoTriangle.com to learn more. And go to MonstersAmongUs.com and click the Patreon tab to join us in the Beyond, where you can get access to hundreds of hours of back content. Content that's only available in the Beyond. Again, that's MonstersAmongUspodcast.com and click the Patreon tab. Alright, folks, I'll catch you all back here on Thursday for a brand new installment. But for now, keep it spooky and have yourselves a good night.